and I want to compliment our aviators who did it.
The Chinese balloon that was spying on the US may have been shot down, but big questions still remain, such as why it took so long to act. It's a very simple timeline. On Saturday, President Biden said that he'd ordered the Pentagon to take down the balloon on Wednesday, but that was already half a week after the balloon had entered the US over Alaska, crossed into Canada, and then into Montana.
We had Montanans calling our office, saying they've seen the balloon in the sky, and in fact, we had a lot of Montanans that said, "Is it okay if I take a shot at it?"
The suggestion that there was no safe space to down the balloon before it got to South Carolina is surely a stretch, particularly given that one of the many states that the balloon passed through included the vast and sparsely populated Alaska.
If the Pentagon doesn't have such a capability to do that safely in the appropriate timeline, well then, with our over $800 billion Pentagon budget, we need to develop that capability rapidly.
Another key question is when the administration first spotted the balloon crossing over US airspace. Sensors should be able to detect an air intruder even when flying quietly at 60,000 feet. And while one doesn't want to stoke fear, the national security implications are huge. The reality is that an undetected balloon would be able to deliver a nuclear explosive that could detonate above the ground and cripple the US electrical grid with an electromagnetic pulse.
What began as a spy balloon has become a trial balloon, testing President Biden's strength and resolve, and unfortunately, the president failed that test.
Rather than putting the public's mind at ease, the Biden administration and much of the media have instead turned to raising speculation that Chinese balloons also passed over the US during the Trump presidency.
Well, it's not true. I can refute it. Former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper refuted it yesterday. Former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo has refuted it.
Other questions for the White House include whether and when it raised the balloon issue with Beijing and how the Chinese responded.
I made clear that the presence of this surveillance balloon in U.S. airspace is a clear violation of U.S. sovereignty and international law.
受西风带影响。
Today, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs is saying the taking down of the civilian airship was unacceptable and irresponsible, insisting that the unmanned airship was for meteorological and other scientific research purposes.
What's shocking to me is that it wasn't until the media actually picked up on this, I think, in Montana, that White House officials actually began addressing it.
Another perhaps bigger question is whether or not the balloon was in fact a test to see how the Biden administration would respond. It's bad enough if the People's Liberation Army launched it to scuttle the Blinken visit, but it's worse if the spy flight was sanctioned by the Politburo and President Xi Jinping. Is the US president really so eager to court better relations with China that he'd overlook the spy balloon if it hadn't been detected?
This is all about China poking at us. This is all about China testing the American resolve.
Congress will no doubt seek answers, and there may be a silver lining if it expands the American public's understanding about homeland vulnerability. That, of course, includes isolationist rhetoric on both sides of the aisle that the US would be somehow safe if it withdrew from engagement overseas.